Hello and welcome to the Indiana Lawyer Podcast, your source for news in Hoosier law, brought to you by Taft. I'm Alexa Shrake, Indiana Lawyer Reporter, and your host this week. As always, I'm here in our Monument Circle studio with Managing Editor Daniel Carson and reporter Maura Johnson to give you the rundown on the latest legal news. Plus, I chatted with Lucy Dollens and Deborah Pollack-Milgate about the Indiana State Bar Association's Woman Empowerment Series. So, let's get started. Today is Wednesday, June 26, 2024, and these are your headlines. To start, Maura, you have news on a new bill passed by the U.S. Senate Judiciary. What can you tell us?
A new bipartisan bill to alleviate judicial shortages across the country was passed by the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee. The Judicial Understaffing Delays Getting Emergencies Solved Act of 2024 is authored by Indiana Republican Senator Todd Young and Democratic Senator Chris Coons from Delaware. The act would increase the number of federal district judges in the most overburdened areas of the country, including the Southern District of Indiana. Young has introduced several versions of the bill since 2020. This latest version promises to create the recommended judgeships during future presidential elections. It would also update the structure and timing of judgeships, require more transparency, and increase access to justice in high-need areas across the country. As of March 2023, there were more than 686,000 pending cases in federal district courts in the U.S., an average of 491 filings per judgeship over a one-year period. The same month, the Judicial Conference of the United States recommended that Congress create 66 new district court judgeships. The last comprehensive authorization of new judgeships was in 1990 and established 11 additional circuit court judgeships and 74 district court judgeships in the U.S. Between 1999 and 2003, 34 more district court judgeships were created through targeted legislation. The bill now moves to the full Senate for a vote.
Thanks, Maura. Next, Daniel, what can you tell us about a letter involving the Indiana Hospital Association?
A high-ranking senator accused the state's leading hospital lobbying organization of being responsible for the gradual breakdown of trust between lawmakers and hospital systems after the most recent legislative session, as documented in a 4-page letter shared with the Indiana Capitol Chronicle. Senator Chris Garton, a Republican from Charlestown, wrote that some legislators had described the Indiana Hospital Association as, quote, arrogant and disingenuous, end quote. The letter, addressed to the IHA's board of directors, named former organization president Brian Tabor, who stepped down earlier this year. In a statement, Tabor maintained that his decision predated the March letter and wasn't related to Garton's comments. The exchange casts a shadow on the 2025 legislative session. Lawmakers plan to tackle healthcare pricing, ongoing Medicaid expenses, and potentially the oft-debated hospital assessment fee. Hospitals would like to alter the fee's current structure, which offsets Healthy Indiana Plan 2.0 expenses, in a way that they say will benefit both health systems and state government. Garton has spearheaded several legislative efforts related to hospitals and also chaired the interim Healthcare Cost Oversight Task Force, which relied upon and utilized testimony from IHA. He was the Senate sponsor on a disputed proposal that he cited in the letter. House Enrolled Act 1004 in 2023, tracking pricing compared to Medicare prices, elicited pushback from Tabor and others. Garton said people on both sides of the issue made concessions, but he was taken aback by IHA's mass emails and public messaging following the bill's ultimate passage. Though the organization has consistently downplayed research from the RAND Corporation ranking Indiana's hospital prices as among the nation's most expensive, Garton said IHA has used RAND research to support other causes. Garton said in an interview that the legislature's relationship with IHA has improved since sending the letter. An IHA statement from current leadership noted the role it plays in crafting legislative proposals related to hospitals and voicing concerns about potential actions. The 2025 session will likely be a tough initiation for Tabor's eventual successor as the General Assembly revisits hospital regulations, pricing concerns, and anti-monopoly efforts. Garton emphasized the importance of legislative action in the healthcare space, calling it a topic that transcends politics and touches every Hoosier household.
Thanks, Daniel. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita has joined 12 other states in filing an amicus brief supporting a Noblesville teenager who started an anti-abortion club and argued that states have an interest in protecting student speech. The case originated in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Indiana and is now before the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. The District Court ruled the Hamilton County School District did not violate ED's rights when they enforced the school's rules for student clubs. During ED's freshman year at Noblesville High School, she started a club called Noblesville Students for Life, which was part of the national chapter Students for Life. The club was initially approved and even had a table at the school's activity fair at the beginning of the school year. But when it came to the flyers for the call-out meeting, ED struggled to get them approved by school administrators. She was told to not include political photos on the flyers. Due to the principal's lack of confidence that the club was student-driven, he revoked the club's approval to meet in the school. ED resubmitted her application the next semester, and NSFL was reinstated. The amicus brief states that the court should rule in favor of ED and reverse the district court's judgment. Back to you, Daniel. You have news from the 7th Circuit.
Family members of a famous 20th century Pentecostal pastor and evangelist did not have valid ownership claims for copyrights to some of the pastor's photos, books, and films. The 7th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in affirming a district court decision. According to court records, Dr. Lester Frank Sumrall founded a church that became an empire. At its peak, the Lester Sumrall Evangelical Association, now LESEA Inc., or LESEA, spread its message from South Bend around the world through television, its ministry Feeding the Poor, and Sumrall's own travels, writings, and media productions. Those writings and productions were prolific. Sumrall registered 43 copyrights in his own name for books and films, and many other works went unregistered or were registered to LeSea itself. Sumrall involved his family in LeSea's business ministry. His eldest grandchild is also named Lester Sumrall, and he was one of the plaintiffs in the case. In its opinion, the 7th Circuit affirmed the district court's decision, finding the trust's claim for Sumrall's work is untimely, while Lester's traveler photo claim fails because LeSea owns the photo's copyright. The court also rejected the trust's contention that, even without owning half the right of publicity, it can bring a claim for an accounting. Quote, and at any rate, notwithstanding its representations at oral argument, the trust never pleaded a basis for such a claim. The allegations it identifies speak only to use of the right of publicity, never ownership, end quote, the court's opinion stated.
Moving on from the 7th Circuit, Maura, you have news about a paralegal award.
The Indianapolis Bar Association named paralegal Laura E. Adamatus Therion as its 2024 Paralegal of the Year, recognizing her outstanding contribution to the legal community. Therion, a member of law firm Plunkett Cooney's Indianapolis offices, was honored at the 2024 Indy Bar Paralegal Appreciation Luncheon on June 5th. As a paralegal, Therion offers litigation support and premises liability and assists attorneys with transportation law matters. She is actively involved in several legal organizations, including the Indiana Paralegal Association, where she served terms as both secretary and president. Therion has been a paralegal for 24 years. The Paralegal of the Year award celebrates the work of paralegals in the industry. Those eligible for nomination must be a member of the Indy Bar and will have made significant contributions to the legal community.
Thanks, Maura. The American Civil Liberties Union of Indiana has filed a federal lawsuit against the city of Loogootee for allegedly blocking this year's LGBTQ+ Community Pride Festival. According to the complaint filed in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Indiana, the city initially approved a permit for Pride Fest 2024 to take place on September 4th. But since then, the city has changed the application process for using city property and rescinded its approval. At the June City Council meeting, a new ordinance was read, repealing and replacing the February 2024 ordinance for special events that will go into effect on July 1st. The complaint alleges the new ordinance is unconstitutional and violates the First Amendment rights of the Patoka Valley Aid Community Action Group, the Pride Fest sponsor. The lawsuit seeks declaratory and injunctive relief. Back to you, Maura, now for news on a sentencing.
A former addiction counselor was sentenced to 16 years in the Indiana Department of Correction for dealing methamphetamine and narcotic drugs to patients in recovery, according to the Vanderburgh County Prosecutor's Office. Michael Garrett Hagedorn was sentenced to 10 years for dealing meth, 10 years for dealing narcotics, and a 6-year enhancement for being a habitual offender. Investors began looking into Hagedorn after tips alleged he was dealing large quantities of narcotics and that he was selling the drugs to people using his counseling services. Hagedorn is the former owner and director of an addiction treatment counseling center. Investigators found around 15 grams of meth in his vehicle. They also found firearms, body armor, marijuana, and digital scales at his home in Newburgh. Handwritten ledgers in the home revealed a list of people who owed Hagedorn money, one as much as $43,000.
And finally, to wrap up this week's headlines, I am looking into the recent lawsuit from several porn websites against Indiana's new law requiring age verification. Indiana isn't the first to do so. The industry is attempting to block age verification, claiming that it violates its users' privacy. You can read more about it in our next print issue on July 3rd. Okay, that'll do for this week's headlines. As always, if you want more legal news, check us out at theindianalawyer.com. Stick around after our sponsor break to hear my interview with Lucy Dollens and Deborah Pollack-Milgate.
Taft, today's modern law firm. At Taft, we cultivate a highly respectful, transparent workplace that fosters creativity, teamwork, inclusion, and diversity. We couple our culture with a client-first approach, rewarding lawyers who understand their clients' goals and work to deliver success. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
I have with me today partner at Crowell & Brady, Lucy Dollens, and Barnes & Thornburg partner, Deborah Pollack-Milgate. The pair help lead the Indiana State Bar Association's 2024 Associate Empowerment Series. It is an exclusive cohort of about 20 mid-level and senior women associates aimed at helping its members develop new strategies for success while building a network of support. So to start, Lucy, where did the idea for this come from?
Yeah, I'm a partner over at Crowell & Brady. I'm a commercial litigator. And we had been looking for a way for women lawyers to connect, to build a network, to support each other. And so we had come up with the idea of forming the Indiana Women's Empowerment Network. So we call it IWIN for short. And we currently have an active IWIN Executive Steering Committee. It's a small but mighty group. We're focused on inspiring, supporting, and promoting women attorneys in Indiana and just toward their professional advancement and success. So that's it in a nutshell. We're trying to find ways to work towards equality for women in the practice of law. So doing things like breaking down barriers, setting achievable goals, encouraging both men and women to join us in this effort. And we want to be a resource for moving the needle for women. We've also, with IWIN, created a safe space for really empowering us to interact, rely on each other, share frustrations, share hurdles, explore potential solutions, and be a resource and support network for each other. So we were looking for ways to really push that out and ways in which we could partner with other organizations to help other women throughout Indiana. And the Indiana State Bar Association approached us about this series idea, and it really aligns with our objectives and our priorities. And Carissa Long over at the ISBA, who is fantastic, we've been working with her to come up with the first inaugural class last year in 2023. And so we kicked it off, had great interaction, and received a lot of feedback, and have a new class this year that we're in the middle of. We're coming towards the end of the last call to cover our final topic. So that's how it came to be.
And so for both of you, why do you think it's important to have a series like this?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. And I'm really happy to be here today to talk about the empowerment series. A couple of things I would highlight that really stick out for me. One is just giving women a platform to understand that they are not alone in some of the experiences that they have. Even today, even when we have, good intentions all the way around from law firms, I think women have a common experience and have frustrations that are specific to them. And this really gives them that space to voice those and to understand they are not at all unique in some of the frustrations that they encounter in the law firm environment. And for me specifically, that's a contrast to where I was 20 years ago. I very much felt alone. I very much thought, I am the one who's having these problems, and this is me. This has something to do with me. And when we get together, we discover, well, it's not really you who's having these issues per se. There's some challenges that are specific to women that we need to work through. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing, which is related in a way, is especially at the level of women we're talking about, mid-level and moving from the associate to the partner level, we sometimes get stuck making that transition. It's really hard to transition from the associate to the partner, to figure out how you're going to move to the next level of your career. And that is also a place where sometimes women go in-house and make other choices, which is not to say we shouldn't make other choices, not at all, but really want to provide a supporting environment for people to understand specifically, how can I move from this stage of my career to the next stage of the career, because it seems really daunting. So those are a couple. There are lots of, I know Lucy and I could talk about this for a long time, but those are a couple of things that stand out for me in particular.
What are some of the topics that this series has covered?
Yeah, we've covered a broad range of topics. We've covered challenges women face in the legal profession. We've covered the so-called work-life balance, and we call it that for a reason. We've covered professional development and the imposter syndrome. That's a really hot topic. I think 70% of the population experience it at some point in their careers, and that's both men and women. So we definitely want to tackle that one. We hit on client development, taking the reins to generate business. Those are just some of the topics that we tackle. But we also just try to create an environment in which discussion is free-flowing. So we could go onto some tangents in a given class or session that's really helpful to a majority of those attending, because it's fresh in their mind. It's something hot that they just came out of dealing with and they want to discuss it. And so we try to provide an environment where we can do that in real time as well.
So, what has your favorite part of the series been so far?
There are a lot of moments that really stand out to me, but what I've been so impressed by, and this is really across the board and through last year and also through this year, is just everybody's willingness to share and to be really vulnerable and really honest about what's going on in their lives. I'm surprised, honestly, that people feel as comfortable sharing as they do. But I can tell you that when they do share that the experiences they have, that is so valuable for the entire group. It goes back again to what I said before, which is understanding that you're not alone in some of the experiences that you have. I commend our group just across the board, the group of women, because I think there's so much that comes out of the experience just because the groups have really been willing to say, this is specifically what I'm dealing with, and it's really hard. And then there's an exchange. There's this great exchange of, how have you dealt with this situation? And just a sharing of ideas for specific situations and how you can move beyond those. So that has really stood out for me. The other thing that I think has been really helpful is just the variety of thoughts within our group. And that has stood out for me as well. Lucy knows that no one can bring up imposter syndrome without my pushing back on that concept. I would call that the so-called imposter syndrome as well, because my view on that is that the imposter syndrome to some degree happens because women often don't feel that they're in a safe space, and someone hasn't created that space that's safe for them. And so women sometimes feel they don't belong. So that's how I interpret imposter syndrome. Others within IWIN interpret it differently. And that has also, I think, been a strength of the series, is having an exchange of different ideas, different approaches to some of those concepts that are out there, the problems that are out there, so that we're not providing one path forward. We're not telling anybody specifically what they should think about a particular area. We're giving them a variety of approaches to use as they encounter these issues within the workplace. And that, to me, has been a really incredible experience as well.
In addition to all of the diversity of thought and the perceptions that are being shared, which is so incredibly valuable, again, to show that you're not walking this line alone, that there are others on this path to professional success that are dealing with the same issues. In addition to those, and providing this vulnerable place where you can be candid to share those, I think one of the most positive parts for me has also been seeing these women form meaningful relationships that hopefully extend and last beyond just this series. We meet 4 times on lengthy sessions, and in between those sessions, there's also brown bag virtual sessions. But our goal is for them to create a lifelong network that they can rely upon beyond just this series, and to continue to expand upon that and realize that that is going to be an important component of their path to success.
So what has been some of the feedback that you've received so far for the series? This is the second time you've done it. What is the feedback been?
In large part, the feedback is that they want more sessions and they want to cover more topics, and they want to even hear from additional speakers. So I think that's really positive feedback, that we're hitting a nerve, and it's certainly something that they find worthwhile. So we're kind of exploring whether or not to add sessions, add topics. I do think the amount of information we could cover is quite extensive, but we certainly are taking a look at that feedback, but I definitely find that positive.
Is there a topic either of you would be, wanting to do that you haven't done yet?
That's a great question. I mean, there's no end to the topics that we could talk about. There really isn't. I think what's great is that our topics, we largely stuck with the same topics from year 1 to year 2, but we didn't do that because it was easy to stick with the same topics. We did that based on feedback that we received from the group. And so the topics really are driven by women themselves and what they want to see. So I think the short answer to your question is that we will address any topics that people feel are worthwhile and that are the ones that are really real to them in their everyday careers.
And I think the makeup of each class has been different, which is good. And they have taken it in different directions. We also, the Indiana State Bar Association does a great job at gathering lots of information at the outset to find out what this particular group of attendees is most interested in. And so we gear our discussion and our allotment of time based on that candid feedback. And then we'll also look to hear from them on their evaluation of the program to continue to tweak it and continue to reach others and hopefully be impactful in this journey.
Looking at next year, your 3rd year for the series, I'm sure you guys are probably taking notes as you're going, or, kind of planning along what you're envisioning it to look like. What is something that you hope to bring back for the series next year?
I think I'll reiterate what I said before, and that is what I hope to bring back. And I think this is really across the board, our approach at IWIN is whatever the women want to see. So we're always looking, as Lucy hinted, we're always looking at ways to tweak, depending on the group we're dealing with, as well as depending on what worked and what didn't. I don't think we really encountered something that didn't work, but trying to optimize the content, trying to optimize the presentation, trying to optimize the way that women are able to interact with each other. So I view this more as we're going to optimize what we have. We're going to continue to optimize content and listen to what it is women need to hear about to move forward in their careers. The other thing I would say just overall that I hope is I really look forward to doing this for a long time because of what Lucy said before, which is this creates every year, it creates a group of women who have a commonality, common experiences, know each other. And sometimes that's lacking across our profession is getting to know other women in other firms. And I do think the cohort is just a really nice contact point for us, for a group of women. And I hope we'll have the first class and the second class and the third class. And so over time, I think we're building a community of women to have more of these discussions. And I view that as a very positive thing.
I agree. And I would like to add that I'd like to see some of these past attendees step up and take leadership and lead future empowerment series. I do think we could reach more. We could certainly tweak it in a way that is much needed so that we're reaching as many as possible and creating those discussions, important discussions, and those important networks for each other, and to be supportive and to create this supportive environment in Indiana for women.
Yeah, well, I think that'll do for this week's interview. Lucy and Deborah, thank you both again so much for joining me today. To our listeners, head over to the IndianaLawyer.com to hear our past interviews. You can also find us on your favorite podcast apps. We'll talk to you soon.